Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Early Bar Football Podcast. It's a new week. It's halfway through the first week, actually, a new week, actually. But nevertheless, it's a new week, a new episode. I think it's episode 6-ish.
Yeah.
Episode 6.
Yeah, we'll call it 6.
You know what it was, actually? When we did the one on Friday, and I said I'm not sure which number season it was for the Premier League. It is like 30 or something like that, isn't it? Because they were talking about it on commentary. And I thought, early bath, early doors. See, that's the kind of information you're getting here. This kind of straight into it. I think we've got the most people we've ever had on a podcast as well today. We've got six people, 7, including myself today. So it's a lot of people, a lot of opinions, but it's exciting, of course, because it was the first weekend of the Premier League season. So there's lots to talk about. We're not going to talk about that straight away, though. We're going to talk about transfers. Today, I'm joined by Tang, Chrissy, Lynchy, Barnes, Ed, and Ginge is here as well. So we're going to start off talking about Tammy Abraham. Tammy Abraham has officially joined Roma from Chelsea for a fee that's believed to be around 34 million. I'll start off with you, Tang. What do you think about this one? Was it the right move, or should he have gone to Arsenal?
I'll leave Chris and Lynchy to decide whether he should have gone to Arsenal or not. But I think it's a good deal. He's young. Even though Roma's general manager said that he has over 200 games and over 100 goals, a quick Wikipedia search suggests that's not true. And Wikipedia is a reliable source of information, as we all know.
200's a lot.
Yeah, well, yeah. He has scored a decent amount of goals, and he's got relatively, good experience for his age. But also, I think Chelsea have a buyback clause, something in the region of like 68 million or something, but they can't use it for a couple of years. So, that's interesting. Chelsea are always quite good at, not protecting their interests, but always having a hold on players. They have obviously 1 million players out on loan. So it's just sort of their thing, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, that was was the one yesterday or today or something like that. It was like Batshuayi's actually signed a contract extension at Chelsea, and he's gone out on loan again.
Yeah, I saw that,
yeah. What a weird career that guy is having, honestly. Just goes out on loan everywhere, but still signs a new contract. Good for him. Chrissy, what did you make of Tammy Abraham going abroad? Is that a good thing for him?
I generally do think it's a good move for him. I think he's dodged an absolute bullet by joining Arsenal because, let's face it, Arsenal are terrible. But that's
a half Arsenal fan.
Yeah, going from a half Arsenal fan. Yeah, but no, to be honest, I'm pleased for him. Like, I'm quite liking like the English players actually going abroad, trying their talent, and learning a new culture, a new life out there. Like especially like the young English players as well. I think it helps them develop a lot quicker than what they do. Because Abraham could just easily sat on Chelsea's bench or, sat in the stands week in, week out, just earning a paycheck. But it also is a bit of testament to him, like, no, I want to go over to Rome, prove that I can, I can show the world what I can do and that. And I really want him to succeed. It'd be good for the England national team, that's for sure.
So it would be interesting to see how he fares in Italy. Lynchy, do you blame him for turning down the mighty Gooners after the performance on Friday?
Well, I don't blame him after Friday's performance, no. I mean, I did hear, I don't know if it's true, he's a boyhood Arsenal fan. I guess you hear about a lot of players that link to your club, don't you? But I heard it was to do with we couldn't shift players because no one wants any of our players, and I don't blame him either. In terms of his move, I think it's a positive one. I mean, if Edin Dzeko going to Inter Milan, Abraham's likely to be starting every week, and I think that's the most important thing. Touching on Chris, he said, to get minutes, to prove everyone wrong. Because he didn't really do too much wrong at Chelsea. I mean, under Tuchel, he didn't really play. And when Lampard was there, he was scoring goals. I mean, he was their joint top goal scorer, I think, last season with 7, along with Jorginho. Obviously, hardly played last season. So it is a good opportunity for him to prove a point to everyone. And the Chelsea are quite smart putting in the buyback clause in case he does do really well and they want to buy him back and they need a striker later in the future.
I think 68 million. Maybe this will be like something that will come back to bite me and it'll be like clipped later on. I just can't see a world that Tammy Abraham's ever going to be worth 68 million. That just seems, even in football crazy prices, that's a lot for Tammy Abraham. But you never know, it might be proved wrong. Lynchy brought up Dzeko, Barnes. Who would you rather have in your team? Would you rather have Tammy Abraham or would you rather have Edin Dzeko? Because for me, I found it a bit bizarre that Inter decided to replace Lukaku with Dzeko, just considering age here. That just seemed like a really strange move. What do you make of that?
Yeah, Dzeko's been going on for ages, hasn't he?
Yeah.
I'm going to say 36, do you reckon? 37?
He's got to be
pretty old
30s,
anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of an odd one for Inter, but we know they have money struggles. In terms of Roma, it's probably quite a good deal. I'm pretty certain that Dzeko was on really high wages at Roma, and I doubt Abraham, even because he's quite young, is probably not on the same wage as Dzeko. So, they got a much younger prospect who's, I think he's got all the attributes to do well in Serie A as well. He's big, strong, he's an intelligent player. I think he'll really thrive over there. And I agree with the boys, really. It's great to see an English player abroad, and I think it's really good for the English national team as well to have potentially a striker that plays every week at the top level, who is an alternative to Harry Kane, who, notoriously is normally injured in major tournaments or has some sort of issue. So I think it's a good move for all parties. Chelsea recouping most of their money, I think, for Lukaku now, I read earlier, not just through Abraham, but through other sales as well. So, yeah, that's quite an interesting addition to that. So good move for Chelsea as well.
Yeah, Chelsea always do good business in the transfer window. They always, even if whenever they spend a load of money, they always find some way of making it back like straight away by selling some people for like a crazy amount. I remember, it was the year like Mourinho won the league with Chelsea the last time, and they brought in like Costa and Fabregas, but they managed to sell like David Luiz for like some average like 50 million and pretty much recoup most of the transfer fees. They always do good business, Chelsea. They're a very efficient club. Ed, what do you think about Abraham and Mourinho? Because as someone that, for me, obviously being a Man United fan, that's had to sort of sit through a Mourinho management masterclass at Old Trafford. Do you think he can develop Abraham? Is Mourinho what he once was?
I think there's still a very, very good coach in there somewhere. I think he's struggled the last couple of jobs he's had in England. I think it will be interesting to see how he does in Italy, very different league. But yeah, like I said, deep down, there is a good coach in there somewhere. You look at what he did with Drogba when he came to Chelsea, he became one of the best strikers in the Premier League and one of the best strikers there's ever been. So I think it's, as we've all said, it's a great move for Tammy Abraham. I think he was somewhat unfairly treated at Chelsea a little bit. He scored the same, if not slightly less goals than Werner, and Werner played twice as many games as him last year. They brought in Lukaku, so he's probably realised, my time is up. In England, how many of the top teams need a centre forward? Not that many. Possibly Tottenham if Harry Kane goes, but would he go to Tottenham is another question. So I think going to Roma is a good shout because it's a competitive league. There's big sides in there. He could do very well, and like we've said, he will be first choice. You'd have thought. So yeah, I think he could learn a lot under Mourinho and learn a lot in Italy.
Ginge, do you think Tammy Abraham and Jose Mourinho is enough for Roma to actually challenge for a league this season? For me, that's a bit, I don't know, it feels like a bit of a stretch, but Italy's a weird place right now when it comes to football, right? You've got a derby, like a derby between Roma and Lazio that's got Sarri and Mourinho going, and they've got heat from their time with Chelsea and Man United. So do you think Abraham realistically could push Roma on?
I think it's one of them leagues that suits that Mourinho style.
Yeah.
Obviously, the addition to Abraham is good. Whether it's enough, I don't know, because the competition in the league, you look at like everyone's sort of, like we touched on it with Dzeko and the Lukaku thing. You look at Inter's team still, they signed Dzeko, like good goal scorer in that league, knows the league well. It is a good signing for them in like Serie A. Maybe not such a good signing for the future, but a good signing in terms of the league. I think they just signed Dumfries as well, if I'm correct.
He's a good player.
To replace Hakimi, who obviously went to PSG. So they've maybe lost a little bit of strength, but they're still like a strong team. And then you look at Juventus, Locatelli, still got Ronaldo. And then, like you said, with Lazio always in and around, the Napoli, you can never write their mouth really because they've still got some quality players.
And AC Milan.
True. Yeah. I think Ibra's still there, isn't he? He signed the new deal. I don't know the rest of the AC Milan team that well, but I think they've got a pretty strong team. They did push it quite hard, didn't they?
Yeah, when they played us last season, Milan, they weren't that bad actually. They had like Frank Kessie. Obviously, they still had Donnarumma at that period of time, which they don't now. But I just think the Italian league, you would think that last season, not that it was a bit of an anomaly, but you had Inter Milan that had Conte there, who's no longer there anymore, which is obviously that's arguably the biggest loss. Forget Lukaku, having Conte, who just wherever he goes, he wins, is a massive deal. You would think given that Juventus have got back Allegri, Ronaldo's his final year on his contract, he's going to obviously go for it. You would think that maybe it'll be business as usual, maybe, and things get back to normality. But you never know. I think it's an interesting one when it comes to Abraham. Whether it's going to be enough for Mourinho and that to win the league. I just thought it was a weird move anyway when it came to Mourinho joining Roma, because that's not a club that realistically is going to be like, okay, he's going to go there, they're going to challenge. Everyone still looks at it like, that's a big ask. But I think that's just a case of where Mourinho's at right now. Like, he was at United, and I'm not one of those people that said he was a complete failure at Man United, because he wasn't. First season we were terrible in the league, but we won 2 trophies, not 3, 2. Won the Carabao Cup and Europa League. Second season we finished second. And whilst we're miles behind it, we finished second and got to an FA Cup final. And then just that last season was a disaster. But that's Jose Mourinho. So the whole Spurs thing with him, I don't know. I don't know. I reckon part of me thinks he just came in for that All or Nothing documentary. That's kind of what he was there for, right? Him there swearing and doing that thing. I saw a clip literally earlier today where he was talking about his dog dying and stuff like that. And I just thought he was just box office to get some subscriptions. That's kind of what it felt like. That's all it was. Yeah. But we'll move on. Oh, go on, Ed.
Yeah, go on. No, go on.
We'll talk about the Premier League. Of course, it was the first week back when it comes to the Premier League. And there was lots of interesting results. What we'll do is we'll go around first about what stood out to you about the first weekend back in the Premier League. And then we'll go into some of the games in particular. So, Tang, I'll start with you. What actually stuck out to you with the first weekend back?
The main thing was the fans being back. I think we can all agree, having packed stadiums. The Brentford Arsenal game, which I'm sure we'll get on to, the atmosphere was electric, quite frankly. It was really good. Although if I hear "Hey Jude" all season, I will literally.
I saw you say that, but I don't know. I disagree. What's wrong with just playing the same
song? If
song?
only chant Owen all season, then I'm going to be fuming.
But they do that at lots of grounds, don't they? Every ground's got
I
their
don't
own
like
song.
any of the grounds.
Yeah, Chelsea play, was it One Step Beyond? Man City are playing Blue Moon. That's what they kind of do, right? Old Trafford plays... What does Old Trafford play? They play Sit Down sometimes, which is ironic. But everyone good grounds have their thing. Do Oxford have a thing? Do Oxford have a thing that they play at the ground every game?
The Oxford players just run through the cones before kickoff. They just do one little sprint through the cones and they're ready for the game.
They just tried to sort of get off and go, look, can we go to the all-you-can-eat Chinese after the game? Because that's actually stupendous. We'll go back to Tang. Yeah. So, I mean, particularly, what's the issue with them with Brentford and Hey Jude? I don't see the issue.
I think every club has that pretty much, and they're making it their main thing. I just feel like they could be a bit more imaginative with their chance.
I think Friday felt very special, didn't it? Not just because it was the opening game. It was the opening game. It was their first game in the Premier League. Fans back. It's a great song. It was a great win.
But all season, I just feel like it's gonna. If it goes on, they need to get a new chant. Sorry, Brentford.
Well, yeah. Well, this is Tang's hill to die on against Hey Jude. Chrissy, what stood out to you about the first weekend back?
Everyone's favourite subject in football, VAR. But to be fair, in a good way, because I thought the use of VAR this weekend was really good. Like to give an example, the Fernandes third goal for Man United. If he would have scored that goal last season, he would have been an armpit hair offside. It would have taken them about 2 minutes to decide he was an armpit hair offside as well. Whereas literally, obviously, the thicker lines, and he was level. And what was that? It took about 10, 20 seconds maximum to check it through. Yeah, I think that's a massive plus going into this season.
Yeah, we saw that at the Euros, didn't we? Where it was funny though, the Euros, because they kept saying, "God, the officiating's been so good," and then there would be games where the officiating was really bad. They would just keep going, "The officiating's been really good at this Euros." But in fairness, they got it right at the Euros in the summer, whereby I think sometimes with VAR, when it's subjective stuff, you can still disagree on the decision, can't you? But eventually, it's kind of, if you just move on really quickly, people forget about it. And that's kind of the case when it comes to VAR. So hopefully that's going to be the case this season. Like you said, I think they said they're going to have a bit of a lighter touch when it comes to it this year, and those kind of situations where it's difficult to tell whether they're offside, just do the line. If you can't tell, give the goal, move on. I think that's the way to go. So it'll be interesting to see if they do that throughout the entirety of the season. Part of the frustrating thing, of course, with VAR in recent years has been that they changed their minds about 5 times through the season as to what the rules actually are.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It'll be an interesting to see if they actually stick to it. That'll be the interesting thing. Lynchy, what stood out to you about the first weekend back?
I'd say just the pure amount of goals. I mean, I think it was one of the highest scoring opening weekends in a long time.
Yeah.
Quite refreshing to see. I mean, we all love watching games of high amount of goals. When you stick on match of the day and they got a good running order, no matter which game you watch, it's going to be enjoyable. So I think that's the main thing that stuck out to me. Yeah, just the sheer amount of goals. I mean, linking to that, I know we'll get into the games in a minute, but the surprise thing for me was the Watford win. Obviously, a 5-goal thriller as well. And if everyone, I think pretty much everyone on the podcast tipping Watford to go down, I think that was one of the things that surprised me the most.
Yeah, I mean, that was interesting, wasn't it? Because obviously you've on the podcast, everyone's given their predictions and spoke quite openly about, you know, who they think is going to go down and who they think is going to do well. And if some of those scores were coming in, there were lots of messages. there were lots of messages being like, oh dear. But look, it's a long season. It happens. Barnes, what stood out to you about the opening weekend?
I guess a couple of things. I watched the games on a Sunday. And Newcastle were actually interesting to watch the first time in about 2 seasons.
Yeah,
I don't think they've gone from
great
Rafa to Steve Bruce. And it was a great game. You know, everyone was flying forward, end to end. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know I was watching. I mean, the end result was still the same. They still lost. So, and the fans still want Bruce out. So not a lot of change, really. But I did enjoy that. And then secondly, I suppose, just the whole Spurs beating Man City and the Harry Kane situation. I think we'll probably come on to it later in the pod. But yeah, I think it's become quite enjoyable now, just the predicament that Harry Kane is now in with Spurs beating City. And I think Nuno getting off to a good start is an interesting one as well. Sets up the season nicely.
Yeah, that was just such a weird game. It was almost like the football in that game was kind of secondary. There was such a circus surrounding it. And I don't know, this actually stood out to me, in particular in the coverage of that game, but it happened a couple of times in some of the other games. So I would assume, given the current sort of COVID world that we're living in, they still can't be in a studio, right? So they're on their pitch side doing their analysis. And after the game a couple of times, they're pitch side talking, is Harry Kane going to go to Man City? And you'll just see Pep Guardiola walk behind him like that. And they just sort of don't look. They sort of just go, oh, I don't know. Or Pep's, it's been terrible tactics. You just see him like that. Which was funny. Priest, what stood out to you?
One thing that I actually just had to double check, there wasn't a single early bath in the opening weekend. No red cards.
No red
cards. That stood
cards.
out to me. One thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, Leeds, I was actually quite surprised by being thumped 5-1 by United, because I'd have thought Bielsa, given how much emphasis he puts on fitness and effort and pressing, I'd have thought they'd have had a grueling pre-season, but they would reap the rewards for it.
Yeah.
But then to come out first game of the season and lose 5-1, I'd expect them to bounce back next weekend, but I was just surprised by the magnitude that they got beaten by.
Yeah, it was quite surprising. I mean, obviously we beat them, was it like 6-2 last season at Old Trafford? So I think some people were thinking goals, but I know a lot of United fans were really concerned because our pre-season's been so disjointed, and obviously Leeds to that side that's going to just press you and they're going to be full of energy. But they just weren't that good. They just weren't that good against us. I mean, their goal, you can't even really criticise United for their goals because it's unbelievable goal. It's a rocket. Yeah. So unbelievable goal. But even then, they're 3-1 down a couple of minutes later. They were surprisingly poor. Which was, surprising me. I don't care, but it was what it was. Jins, what stood out to you?
Well, as I said, Leeds were my dark horse, and then they go and get thumped. I'd say that's a bit of a surprise to me, to be honest.
That kind of expertise that you bring.
Yeah. One thing I will say, playing a centre-back in Calvin Phillips' role probably had something to do with the fact that they got thumped, because he just did not look comfortable playing in that position at all. I can't. Is it Strick? I'm not sure if that's just the correct way to pronounce his name, but he's obviously a decent centre-back, but he just did not look comfortable playing in that Phillips role at all. When I watched the game, I was just thinking, I think that's why Fernandes had so much joy. It's because he wasn't quick enough to play in that position. The other thing that surprised me, I have to say, was Watford as well. I think everybody was a bit surprised, and that Sarr was just outrageous. Probably the best player that first game week. I couldn't, honestly. I sort of forgot about him a little bit, because obviously he come in the season before last and he had a couple of good games. And I can't remember, I think maybe Liverpool we had a really good game against when they got relegated.
Linked with Liverpool. When they went down, he was linked.
He's linked with United as well. He's linked with United as well. And a lot of the United fans kind of turned their nose up at him because they thought, we could do better than that. But
they wanted a lot for him as well.
Yeah.
They wanted like 40 million, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sort of hoping it's not going to be like one of those sort of two games a season players, but that he absolutely tore them to shreds, didn't he? In pockets of that game, and you think like everyone's looking at Villa and thinking they're going to be dangerous this year, and then Watford just deserved to win it. That was a massive shot for me. It was Watford, to be honest, because I think everybody in this podcast had a little bit of like doubt about whether they had the strength to actually do anything this year.
But still, like winning the opening game, sorry, is
subbed,
of them
he?
doing. Oh, did he?
Yeah, he did, half time.
Winning the opening game though is still a very Watford thing to do. Like, you know, because they would be one of those teams. Again, it wouldn't shock you if like halfway through the season they're like 11th or something like that, because that's just how they work. They'll keep changing the managers over and over and over. They have a little bit of success, which then disappears after like a year, and then they'll go through like 5 more managers and get relegated. That's the pattern. That's how Watford works. I do want to talk about some of the games specifically. The first one, of course, was the opening game, which was Brentford Arsenal. We're not going to get through the podcast about.
Purposely picked that one, haven't you?
There's no way we're not going to get through it. So that was the opening game, and to be honest with you, from my point of view, like I know some of the Arsenal fans were saying, well, that was like I think it's like the most shots that they've had in an Arteta game or something like that. They had like 20 shots. But let's make no mistake about it. I thought Arsenal were terrible. I thought they were really bad. And I know they didn't have Aubameyang and Lacazette, and I think today, like, there's the stuff about them getting Odegaard coming back in. But I put it in the group chat after the game of like, I mean, Arsenal, I guess, will always be a big team because of their history. But in the context of the Premier League now, Tang, are they a big team anymore?
I don't think they are. I think that's pretty much it. I think similar to when Liverpool were bad, sort of 10, 15 years ago, maybe now, or probably earlier than that. But like they were a big team, but they just weren't doing well. Probably not to the scale that Liverpool were, but I think Arsenal are just, I've said it before, so bang average. I mean, I think you posted a clip, Owen, of them conceding pretty much the exact same goal against Stoke.
Yes, it's Stoke Roy Delap throw in. It's that, and then a Ricardo Fuller masterclass. That's it. That's the game.
Same old Arsenal. I mean, I couldn't believe that. And I think obviously they're going to sign Odegaard, which would be a good signing for them. But I saw like a 2 or 3 minute clip where they had all the like good stuff that Odegaard did last season, and nice passes, nice interplay, but all the chances he created. It was a really bad finish, and it would just be clips of Odegaard doing a nice pass and then Arsenal missing a chance. And as well, all that, whilst Odegaard would be a good signing, they need to get a striker in really, because Aubameyang not doing it.
Still want Arsenal that came 8th last season that he played in.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I mean, speaking of someone that is a big Ben White advocate, what did you think of his performance?
Shaky, very shaky,
to say the least. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I actually think he's downgraded. I said this in the chat. I think he's actually downgraded on his defensive partners with Arsenal than he is for Brighton. I think alongside him at Brighton, he had Lewis Dunk, who's England cap, just one. Not going to say plural, just one probably. And he's Lewis Dunk. So whatever you say about him, he's a proper defender. You know, he's a real leader. And Adam Webster's a really good ball playing centre back, and you have players like Tarek Lamptey and stuff like that. With Arsenal, you've got like Rob Holding, I think, wasn't it, at the weekend or Friday night at right back, and it's just like
it's Callum Chambers.
Oh, Callum Chambers, sorry, there's Rob Holding
because that was the first goal. That was the first goal, wasn't it, Callum Chambers?
Rob Holding,
the fact that Rob Holding's still there shows that it's just not Arsenal's defense is so weak, and it was maybe half decent in 2015, but we're 6 years later, and they still got pretty much the same defenders.
I'll move on to you, Chrissy. I know you have a lot to say about Arsenal against Brentford. What did you make of the game?
Amateur, disgraceful, pathetic. Usually that'd be words to describe how I play on a football pitch, but you could use the exact same words to describe Arsenal. I mean, other than Smith Rowe, Tierney and Saka, the rest of the team were they weren't even okay. They were dreadful. To be honest. I mean, if Ivan Toney's bullying, Ben White and Pablo Mari, I dread to think what Lukaku's going to do against those two, because blimey, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be tricky. Like that's the thing. Obviously, got Chelsea and City next, and if we play like that against those two teams, we're we're going to be in trouble. It could, I would say this as a bit of a joke, but it could generally be double figures against both of those teams if they turn up and Arsenal play like they did on Friday. And obviously the thing with Ødegaard, don't get me wrong, I think Ødegaard will be a good signer for Arsenal, but they need defenders. It's painfully obvious. I mean, look at the right back situation. We've got Bellerin, Chambers, Cedric. I mean, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. And then obviously going back to the second goal. I mean, yeah, it was like what it was like going back in the TARDIS, going back into 2008 and watching Stoke at the Britannia, seeing Roy Delap line one up, throws it, and then someone like Mamadou Sidibe or Salif Jal knocks it in the back of the net. Oh, it was embarrassing. It was embarrassing.
It was bad. It was really bad. And I'll move on to you, Lynchy, because Chrissy brings up a really good point that the next two games, they were bad anyway, but they're scary now. Like that, they're scary because, I mean, like I said, Ben White got bullied by Ivan Toney. So let alone Romelu Lukaku. That is terrifying, isn't it? It's got to be.
Yeah, I mean, to be quite frank, the club is pretty much a shambles from top to bottom. I mean, it was dreadful last season. As an Arsenal fan, last season was the worst season I've ever experienced, and that was the low of the lows. I mean, I think when we went on like a 4-game losing streak against Aston Villa, Burnley, Wolves, all at home, it's shambolic, and then just nothing's changing at all. I mean, it's not just the team; it's the whole club. It's just absolutely dreadful. It's just so depressing, honestly. But yeah, it's a scary thought the next 2 weeks, especially against Lukaku. I mean, like you said, when Ivan Toney, he's a good player. He's done well to League One Championship, but it's his first ever Premier League game, and he's bullying our new 50 million star signing. It is very, very concerning.
What do you think it takes to get rid of Arteta then? Do you think, do you think he'll last this season one? And what do you think it takes for him to finally get the sack?
In terms of what it would take, I think the board are quite stubborn. Like it will have to be a dreadful losing run. Like, I mean, I thought last season he should have gone in that run I was talking about when we lost to Burnley, Aston Villa, Wolves at home. He thought, like, if he's going to go, he's got to go now. And if he's not going to go now, he's pretty much never going to go. And they came out and obviously supported him. So I think it would have to be a dreadful losing run. I mean, we've got West Brom in the second round of the Carabao Cup. We probably have to lose to them, lose the next 2 games, which is inevitable anyway. And then probably lose to a couple of the mid-table teams at home or something. And that would be people we calling for him to go then. And I can't see him staying if that happens, because last season we didn't even end the season that well. I mean, drew to Fulham last minute. Eddie Nketiah came on. I can't even remember what happened at the end of last season. It's that unrememberable. Like, it's just, yeah.
Traumatic.
The board are just, they're sort of similar to the Glazers in the way, is they never come out publicly and do anything. Like, he's always in America. They're never over here supporting the club in terms of vocally coming out and having dialect with the fans. So if they're not going to do that now, then they're just going to hide behind Arteta pretty much, and we'll give him the sack and then carry on, take the money out of the club and put no money back in.
I can't see him lasting the season. I really can't. I mean, unless he somehow turns it around, but I just really don't see it. Barnes, what did you make of that Brentford Arsenal game?
Well, I think, to be fair, we should give Brentford some credit. I think they actually played really well. Thomas Frank set them up. Like Brentford in the Championship, they did not play like that at all. They're very much a possession team, progressive passing, but they knew they were playing against Arsenal, so they lumped it up to the big men, Mbeumo and Toney up front, and caused Arsenal a lot of problems. Like the boys have been saying, it was like going back to Stoke, the red and white kits, it was like exactly the same. So not much has changed, but it's a difficult one with Arsenal because the hysteria and the sort of hyperbole that just surrounds the club constantly. I don't know, that's maybe comes from the fan base and the media and things like that. If Arsenal loses, a massive story. It always is. So I suppose that does suggest they're a big club. But if looking more on the pitch, watching the game, there was a couple of areas. The boys have already mentioned right back. Callum Chambers should not be starting right back at the start of the Premier League season. That just shows your preparation's been poor if that's who you start. And nothing against him. I'm sure he's a good pro and all that, but he should not be starting. Especially with an Arteta style that relies on the fullbacks getting forward. You see Tierney on the other side is always bombing forward, getting crosses in. Chambers is not that player. You're asking him to do a role that he's not used to. And I think that kind of sums up Arteta under Arsenal. I thought when he first came in, he played 5 at the back, and they looked okay. They're quite boring, but they were okay. They sort of did a job. And now he switched back to this 4, and it seems so open. It doesn't. And they brought Ben White in and played him in a 4 at the back. He didn't play that role for Brighton. He normally played in the 3, even played in midfield sometimes. It doesn't make any sense, especially against the Brentford team who've got big, powerful forwards. I just don't get it. And one more thing I would say on the game that I thought, Leno was so bad. For the goal, the second one, he should have just come out and caught it, or he should have at least complained about that he'd been fouled. Because I think it probably was a foul, but just no one complained about it. They just let it happen. And every time he takes a millisecond too long on the ball and allows the Brentford players, or whoever they're playing against, to get in closer, which means every time he's passing to a defender, they're always under pressure. If he was more decisive on the ball, I think they'd get out so much easier. But yeah, I wouldn't say the first goal was his fault to me. I don't know about you, Owen, but maybe he could have saved it, but he hit it quite hard, and he was slightly unsighted by Chambers. But
I'm always if it's near post, I'll always be a bit like, well, maybe should have done a bit more. But to be fair, Chambers was awful defending. But when it came to Leno, that wasn't the only time he did that in that game. Every single cross or throw in or quarter, he flapped at everything. And it's just the Arsenal goalkeeping situation is just a parody at this point anyway, because they got rid of arguably their best goalkeeper. And now they're bringing in someone that's a serial relegator.
Well, maybe Ramsdale. I will defend. I mean, there's so much negativity surrounding that transfer, but he is only 23. That's very young for a goalkeeper. Goalkeepers have long career. I assume he's going to sign a long-term contract. So if he turns out to be good, it could actually be a fairly good buy from Arsenal. But obviously, his record so far isn't great. But, it's not the worst. He is English as well, so it could be a good backup.
Yeah, the thing is, I would be willing to give Ramsdale more credit, and I would overlook the relegations if I'd seen him make good saves and stuff like that. But there have been so many goals that I've seen go in when I go, how on earth has that gone in? Or you should have saved that, or that was poor goalkeeping. And when they do it a lot, you sort of go, maybe just not very good goalkeeper. I'll move on to you, Ed, because Tang actually touched on it earlier, that Liverpool, I don't think Liverpool were ever in the situation a bit like Arsenal in the sense that, for this sort of length of time where it feels like it's just only getting worse. But Liverpool did have that period of time where they were like a 7th or an 8th, and they were just that club that used to be good a long time ago. Do you see Arsenal ever getting to where, like, let's say Liverpool are now, getting out of it?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty accurate comparison for where Liverpool were. There was a period of time where, we weren't top 4. We were struggling to get Europa League at best. I think there was at least one, if not a couple of seasons where we didn't get any European football, which is the situation Arsenal are in now. But we still had a couple of players that you could rely on that were match winners. I think the season where we dropped out of all European competition, we then went and bought Luis Suarez and then kicked on and almost won the league. So are any of Arsenal's signings even remotely close to Luis Suarez's caliber? Absolutely not. Mm. And you look at that Arsenal dressing room and there's just no leaders in there. There's nobody where you'd say he could win us the game, really. And apart from maybe Saka or potentially Smith Rowe, I don't think he's quite there yet, or Aubameyang on his day. The rest of them are very, very average. And I think the other telling aspect of it is that we all kind of saw this coming. A lot of us backed a draw, or at least Brentford to score. That says a lot that it then went and happened.
Well, I backed Brentford to win.
Yeah, and you're an Arsenal fan, which is the whole issue, is that this is not the first time this has happened, and it won't be the last time. I think you mentioned earlier about Arteta. I think he is quite an inexperienced manager, and I also possibly can't see him lasting the season. I think, like Lynchy said, if you go on a run of losing against teams that you really should be beating, that could be his time up. But I'd also question the players, and I know we question the players a lot, but it's the same group of players, a lot of them that were under Emery as well, and they did exactly the same thing while he was manager. Sometimes you've got to look at yourself in the mirror and realise you have not played well enough. And none of those players in the Arsenal squad look like they really give a shit. None of them look like, true. Oh yeah, I didn't play very well today, or come out and say, yeah, that was my fault. Like we just talked about Leno, who was potentially at fault for both goals. He hasn't come out and said, yeah, my bad. I'll do better next week. They just don't look like they care.
No, and it's funny because we spoke about Emery before, and Emery gets a lot of stick of being, the good evening guy, all that kind of stuff. But everywhere else he's been successful, and he got that Arsenal team to a Europa League final. Maybe he's not a bad coach. Maybe he's not a bad coach after all.
They say the same about Wenger as well, don't they? At the
Yeah,
end of
exactly.
his tenure, where they had banners saying, "Oh, thanks, but goodbye." He was doing a hell of a job with that football.
He was still getting Europa League. He was still getting
Exactly.
your 5th or your 6th. They would kill for that today. Absolutely kill for that. So, be careful what you wish for, I guess. Ginge, what did you think of Brentford, Arsenal? I mean, I think Barnes did bring up a good point. Do we kind of overlook how well Brentford played, or was it a case of Arsenal just being so bad?
I think you've got to give them credit. But I don't think, I know it looks terrible for Arsenal at the minute, but like Priest made the point about Liverpool, you look at like the signings they had before Suarez. Like I don't think anybody really expected Suarez to do as well as he did. Do you think, coming from the Dutch league? There's been a lot of failures from that league. No one really expected him to become like the best striker in the world. Eventually, obviously not at Liverpool, but at Barca. And they signed Andy Carroll at the same time as Suarez, and everybody thought he was the big premium signing. And look how difference in the two of the careers after that. So, and you look at the teams that like Liverpool went on the 2 seasons after or a season after and nearly won the league with like Ali Sissoko at left back and Kolo Touré, and you're laughing, and like you look at Arsenal's team, it's the same sort of laughable sort of like players in that position. Like you think Arsenal get like a gem of a signing, maybe they don't exist anymore. Maybe those £15 million gems don't exist anymore. I don't know. But in theory, you could get a player like a striker like that just comes in and completely changes the entire thing. A bit like Bruno Fernandes' effect at Man United. They weren't a team that looked like they wanted to win. And then he's come in and instilled that mentality, and they're a completely different team now. So I don't think it looks bad, but I don't think it's as bad as necessarily everybody's thinking. A lot of people are joking saying they'll finish bottom half. Like, maybe if they don't make any more signings and don't improve, maybe, but I still think they've got some like gems in that team. You're looking at Smith Rowe and Saka. I don't think they're going to be poor all season. So I think
Ed brings up a good point with the Liverpool comparison, is that even when Liverpool were bad, they still had to say Steven Gerrard. Steven Gerrard ain't going anywhere. You know what I mean? My concern would be, if I was an Arsenal fan, it's very feasible in the next sort of 18 months that Saka and Smith Rowe could both leave. I know Smith Rowe's, I think he just signed a new contract or something like that, but it's not out of the realm of possibility that Man City just suddenly decide, 60 million, boom, and they'll go. Maybe you're right. Maybe it does take that one player for Arsenal. I just don't know who on earth that would be, and I don't see.
Maybe
even if you dropped.
Anymore.
Maybe it doesn't exist anymore. I mean,
maybe those gems don't exist. It's Suarez like 1 in a million. Maybe you never expected him to do. He obviously had a great season at Ajax, but you never expected him to go on, like join Liverpool and being like the secondary signing really to Andy Carroll. If you look at it, the money and the price tag, he was the second sort of playing second fiddle to Andy Carroll, and for him to go from that to being, everybody knows the career he's had, like ridiculous, goals. I don't think you can really get that anymore. Maybe with
look at Arsenal's recent history as well, though, of what could have been as well. This is a club that, talk about Liverpool, they triggered that release clause from Liverpool from Suarez, and I don't really know what happened in the end, but that didn't pay off. They had a deal or a bid agreed for Jamie Vardy, and he turned them down. So this is a club that a couple of times has been close to maybe getting that player, whether it was Suarez, whether it was Jamie Vardy, and I don't know if that's bad luck. I don't know if that's just, the sins of what's been wrong with Arsenal. I don't know. But if I was an Arsenal fan, which of course I'm not, I mean, Lynchy and Chrissy would know better, but I would just be so disheartened it just feels like even in the first game, it's exactly the same. It's like a bad version of Groundhog Day.
I was just going to say, I don't know about Chris, but I still can't go over the fact that Thomas Partey left Atletico Madrid for us. And the season after he left, they will go and win La Liga. I mean, that's the one thing I think there still must be some attraction to players to come in, because I don't understand why he would have left Atletico to come to us. And every player who signed for us recently always goes on about how one of the main reasons they joined is because of Arteta. I think Odegaard and him have a very good relationship, for instance. So, I mean, there must be some attractions for that.
I think.
I mean, I don't know why Thomas
London.
Partey
I
would
think
leave
being
to
in
win.
London as well helps, isn't it? Being a club in London, because sometimes even United, we've lost out players, or even like Liverpool have lost out players because they just want to go to London. If you're from abroad, they might just want to go to London, and I don't know how much they pay, but I mean, I don't know. Like you said, the Partey one just was bizarre to me. I thought that was such a good signing for them last season,
Yeah,
and then he
we
barely
missed him 'cause he hardly
plays.
played. Yeah, he's been
Exactly.
injured quite a lot.
And he just walks off in the in that Tottenham game. We just stopped. It's just strange, isn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of the attraction is money, as well as the fact that you're playing for a big club in London. I think Thomas Partey's on 200k plus. You look at Ozil when they signed him; he was on silly money. Aubameyang now, Lacazette. Arsenal are notorious for paying people a lot of money.
Well, their contracts are bad. They're bad contracts, don't they? Like the
another...
Ozil one was a bad
$3-year
contract.
deal, like 150k a week.
Yeah,
that was another thing I was going to come back to. When you compare Liverpool and Arsenal, yes, those gems may or may not exist in the transfer market these days, but I'd argue that Liverpool are much more likely to find those gems than Arsenal, because Arsenal's recruitment is mediocre at best. Thomas Partey is probably one exception.
They've worked on their recruitment. They've got this sort of new system in place of like Edu and all that kind of stuff. And even now, it's still they constantly feel like a club in turmoil. Even if they do positive steps to get out of it, like change. Okay, we're going to change our structure. We're going to have a director of football. We're going to do this. It's still the same, which is just crazy. I do want to talk about one more game because we're rapidly running out of time. I do want to talk about, obviously, the game that was on Sunday, which was Spurs-Man City, because obviously there's a circus surrounding that when it comes to Harry Kane. Now, Harry Kane wasn't in the squad on Sunday. Reportedly, he was in the stadium. Nobody could find him. So I don't know if he's like Phantom of the Opera, standing up in the rafters.
He's doing a shadow over
one eye, like looking down like that. I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, he was in the stadium on the Spurs on the Man City bench actually. But yeah, it was the circus surrounding that, and then he was named in Spurs Europa Conference League squad, but he reportedly hasn't travelled. I think he has been back in training this week. I don't know. Either way, it's a bit of a circus. Tang, what did you make of the game, and what do you make of the whole Harry Kane fiasco going on right now?
I think Tottenham played well. I think everyone's obviously expecting City to walk this league with the signings that they've made, but I think Spurs did well. And I think for the whole Harry Kane thing, he was named in the squad for their Europa Conference League game. I think that's for both legs. So, right. And he hasn't travelled for this, obviously the first day, because I think he's going to come back in training this week. So that's an interesting one. I will say, my line manager, shout out to Sam. He told me he actually went to the game on Sunday. So he was telling me that apparently in terms of like the marketing around Spurs' stadium and before the game they'll play VTs on the big screen. Apparently they've massively reduced sort of Kane's involvement and all that. So when they're like modeling the kits and stuff, Kane's not in that. Apparently they play like VTs where they have all the goals from like previous seasons and do sort of hype music and stuff. They've reduced Kane's like involvement in that. That's a telling sign, I think.
There's no goals.
That must have been a bloody short video.
Yeah. No, from like previous seasons and stuff. Like,
look what happened last season. Nothing.
Yeah. So I think that's a bit of a telling reason. I think Spurs are trying to get a striker over the line, and then Kane will go, because as soon as Kane leaves, whoever they're negotiating with is going to be like, oh, you've got like 100+ million now. Pay us more money. So I think Dan Levy's playing a game here where he wants to get someone in, and then Kane can go.
It's an interesting one. Make no mistake, Chrissy, that this was the most expensive lineup in Premier League history by Manchester City, and a bench that was worth 350 million. So does Pep Guardiola have any excuse to say to complain after the game about, if we would have had a striker? Or I saw some City fans saying, well, if we would have had Harry Kane, we would have won that game. Well, yeah, obviously. If Man United would have had Harry Kane, we would have won the Europa League final. What kind of hypothetical are you living in that kind of scenario? What a load of nonsense. I mean, what did you think of Man City and their performance at the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, well, you also got to take into the fact that Graham Souness said, he expects a player like Paul Pogba, who's worth 100 million, to produce 4 assists in the game.
What a buffoon.
Exactly. But if he's talking that sense, why aren't you saying, Man City should have beaten Spurs by 3-0 in that sense? Because, like you said, they fielded the most expensive lineup in football history, not just Premier League history, in football history. And to be honest, they didn't even look like scoring. I can't even remember any chances where Lloris has had to make an absolute worldy save just to keep Spurs in the game and whatnot. And to be honest, like you just look at City's performance, like even when they went 1-0 down. I know Gary Neville commented when he was on commentary. They didn't even look like they wanted a bit of urgency to get an equaliser. They were still passing the ball around the back, walk with the ball. I know Gary Neville went in on Benjamin Mendy a bit because he was just walking out slowly. The only time City really looked like they was going to do anything was when they brought De Bruyne on. I mean, if they would have brought De Bruyne on maybe 10 minutes earlier, maybe they would have got an equaliser. But yeah, I mean, it is one of them. They do need a striker in that, but it is pretty embarrassing that they've spent, that was a squad worth 800, 900 million, and they didn't even look like scoring.
I think also as well, just you pointed out Graham Souness, if his logic is that £100 million player, which Pogba is not, by the way, he is not £100 million player. He was a €100 million player, whatever, but he was like 89 million overall. So if we're going to get into that, but that's not my point. That's very granular. I understand. I can see your face, Ed. My point is, if Graham Souness is saying that a £100 million player should be getting 4 assists every game, by that logic, Paul Pogba should have roughly like 152 assists a season, if that's the case. It's just Graham Souness. He's just, I don't want to swear on it, so he's an idiot. And we'll move on. Lynchy, what did you think of Spurs versus City? Do you think Kane will leave?
I think it's actually going to be quite hard for him to leave now. I mean, we all know how stubborn Daniel Levy is, and Kane's not in that good a position. I mean, there's this thing about I've got a gentleman's agreement or whatever, but what's he got? 3 years left on his deal. Didn't sign a new one too long ago. Yeah. I don't think on Kane's side he's in that good of a negotiating position against Levy. I don't know if Man City will want to pay 150 million. I think there's the maximum on the payment is like around 120. I mean, when you think about it, with the squad Man City have got, I think it might be better for them to try and wait a year without getting him and get someone like Haaland. I mean, I don't know if you guys saw at the weekend. I mean, he got 2 goals, 3 assists, and it was unbelievable. Looks so good at the moment. And if they could, I mean, surely they'll be one of the teams highest on the list that he'd want to go to. I don't see why he wouldn't be. And with a 75 million approximately release clause for him. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Man City's actual performance, I mean, I think Benjamin Mendy I think the left back area in general. I mean, I don't think Zinchenko or Mendy are Man City standards, to be honest with you. I think there's definitely a weakness in that area, even though all of the wealth of the squad they've got in other areas. But I think they also still do rely on De Bruyne a tiny bit when they come on. They do look to him to create something out of nothing because of how good he is. I mean, all those attacking midfielders they got, they didn't look like breaking down Tottenham at all. But I mean, credit to Tottenham. They did play really well. They came with a game plan and they stuck to it and it worked.
I agree. I thought Tottenham played well. I mean, Barnes, how good is Son? I mean, still without Kane, still gets goals, still manages to get goals against a club like Manchester City. Who's more important to Spurs, Son or Kane?
It's a good question. I mean, in terms of money, we all know Harry Kane is more important. I don't think Man City would be trying to sign Son for 150 million euros personally. But I would say, in terms of, they can definitely live without Kane, Spurs. And I've said it before on these pods that this is the best time that Tottenham could get rid of Harry Kane. They are never going to get offered more money than they will this season for him. It's the perfect time. And they've just showed in that performance, and they showed it last season, that they can play without Harry Kane. Obviously, Kane's an amazing player. But with Son, with their other players, I just think it allows them to shine a bit more. So, yeah, I don't think it's necessarily all bad. It's definitely not all bad if Kane leaves and Son's an excellent player. I think it's quite interesting as well. There's players like, we were talking about Arsenal, where they have a lot of players who just aren't that great. But Tottenham last season, like Eric Dyer and Davinson Sanchez, I was exactly the same. And yet, here we go again, new season. Those two are starting centre-backs. I would not be, if I was a Spurs fan, I wouldn't have been pleased to see that. But they were both excellent in the game. Yeah, and
Sanchez was
that
incredible.
surprised me. So players can improve. It's not that binary as they've had a bad season or they've had a bad few games. They are bad. You can coach players and you can improve them, and they can get better under different managers. So it'd be interesting to see how Spurs go. I don't think they beat Man City. I still don't think they'll be anywhere near or top 4. I think those top 4 teams that we've mentioned before are still going to be well away. But yeah, interest one. City, they need a striker. That's obvious. I think you can keep buying attacking mids, and their spend on like their whole team is ridiculous. Like Nathan Ake is included in the most expensive team in the world. Really not. Don't rate him at all. Not sure why they paid. Was it 50 million for him?
Yeah.
Mendy's been mentioned, but yeah, I think it's clear they need a striker. They can't just go into the season with Jesus. So let's see where this Kane transfer saga ends up.
Do you think the result of the weekend? I mean, there's a couple of ways to look at it. Do you think one, the result made Spurs think, you know what, actually, we don't maybe need Harry Kane and we can cash in? Two, do you think it made Man City go, actually, we were going to pay 100, 120, we'll be willing to go to 150 off one game? Do you think that result plays into both those things?
I think the former will be the case. I think Spurs will have sat in the dressing room after that game and gone, we were decent today. We were very solid at the back. We caused City, one of the best teams in the league, in the country and the world, a lot of problems. We can do this without Harry Kane, not a problem. I think for City, I don't think they'll be as knee-jerk as that. I think they had a bad day. I think they probably had a disrupted pre-season, a lot of players coming back late. I think they'll go again. We'll see a reaction this week. I think they've got Norwich at the weekend. I'm sure they'll stick 7 past Norwich. But Tottenham, I was surprised by Tottenham. I was a bit critical of Nuno before the season started. I thought it was a little bit of a bizarre appointment. But actually, they looked seriously well drilled. As Ash just mentioned, he looks like he's taken some seemingly average players last season and made them look a lot more solid at the back, which is obviously a hugely important foundation for any team. And I think back to that Wolves team that Nuno created. They were very solid. They were very well drilled, but also they were good. They were pretty good going forward when they needed to be. And I think that showed at the weekend. They were both solid at the back and created chances and caused City problems.
Yeah, I thought, I mean, I'll move on to you with this one, Ginge. When it came to Nuno, obviously he wasn't Spurs' first choice. I mean, I don't know what choice he was, like fourth or something like that. And certainly I think a lot of people were surprised him going there in the end. Where do you see Spurs finishing off this season? I mean, obviously it's just one game, but do you think they can actually carry that into something a bit substantial this year? Maybe even win a trophy in that Conference League?
I think maybe trophy might push it a little bit. But I still think they have a decent
even in the Conference
season.
League, because they're going up against teams like Hibs or whatever.
Yeah, but I don't know. Do you think they're really going to take it amazingly seriously?
If I was there, legitimately, I would, because just to get that out of the way, you know what I mean? Just being like, okay, screw it, let's get a trip. Because if you win that, you do qualify for the Europa League next season. So you never know, right? It's not bad. It wouldn't be a bad thing to do.
They probably have space for a trophy, so I mean, it'd be worthwhile. And it does break break that curse, doesn't it, of the years of not having a trophy. But I mean, that this Conference League it'd be one of those trophies that will either like become really popular or it will literally die because it's not competitive enough. It's going to go one or two ways. It's either going to be really good and a really good avenue to get European football for smaller teams, or it's just going to be. It's almost going to be taken like the approach of the
Intertoto Cup.
Yeah, where it sort of becomes a bit of a, I don't know. They just use it as a reserve team game, if that makes sense. Sort of a crap game, really. I still think they'll have a pretty good season. I think obviously Kane's like a major player for them, but you look around the team, if they can get them, if Nuno can get them playing, I think there's still some quality in that, especially in the middle. I mean, you look at Ndombele, if you get him ticking and you've got Højbjerg's not the most pretty player, but he's an effective player. It can really do some damage to some teams, I think, with the players they've got. It's just whether they can, they need to keep the back four fit and on form. And then that's the only way they're going to stop conceding goals. But I think if they can start and continue, I think that's what Mourinho had the problem with. They had like a good spell and then they'd have one bad game and then it would just all go downhill. Because remember
they were top briefly last year, weren't they?
Yeah,
they were terrible.
They beat City at home, didn't they? And everyone thought, I could kick on here and do it, and then it just completely fell to bits. But if they can sort of break that hoodoo and actually get a good run of form going, I think they could actually have a decent season. Even with or without Kane, I think, because Son's still ridiculously good. Still good. One of the best players in the league. So I think they'll be fine.
I do want to talk about one more thing. and everyone knows what's coming. We're going to talk about Poogate. Right. now, Leify isn't here this evening, which is incredibly disappointing because over the weekend, I don't even know if I can do it justice considering that Leif isn't here. But basically, over the weekend, we've got our little group chat, and Leif put in that I think he went out the night before, and he lives in like a building. He's got a flat, and he lives in a building. And he came in, and he went, "Oh my God, there's a poo by the stairs." And animals come in, right? That happens, but it was a human poo. And we've been discussing this in way too much depth, to be honest with you. And the fact that it's made it to the podcast on episode 6, it says a lot in terms of the content that we can deliver. I really wanted to open up to a forum. We've tried to break down who this is or who this could be. Tang, you've got a lot of theories about this.
Many.
Now, first of all, I know some people would be saying, well, why are you discussing it if Leif's not here? Is that an indication of guilt? I don't know. I can't answer that question. I wasn't there. He denies that it was him. I believe him, but he's not here. He has a rotator cuff injury, which he says is from football, but it would be curious to know that the poo in question was by a flight of stairs with railings. And we were discussing before we went on the air, it's well within the realm of possibility you used one said railings for leverage, which could absolutely damage your shoulder. So and he was telling everyone how well he played at football last night, by the way. So he's acting like, the injury just came up in last night. Interesting. Tang, what do you think about this? You've been very in-depth about this. When we've been
I think I take these. Yeah, I take this very seriously. We asked Leif. Was it you? And he said no.
No.
And that's exactly what someone would say if they had done it.
Yes.
That's what I'm going to say on this topic.
And he found it. If this was like a serious crime, they always say person who calls it in, they're a suspect.
Numero uno.
Straight away, they're a suspect. There's been some kind of numero deux.
Oh, wow. Very good.
Number 2, poo. So he's got to be a prime suspect, and I think he knows that himself. He has said this. He said that his neighbors think that he might have done it. I'm still not 100% sure if he didn't do it or not. I don't even know if he remembers doing it or not. That's my question. Chrissy, what do you think of Poogate? You've got opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very suspicious about Leify. He's known.
Legitimately, by the way, Leif, I know when you're watching this wasn't meant to be a thing of we know you did it. Tell us. I wanted just to discuss it. But Chrissy, carry on.
I mean, the evidence and the background history as well when it comes to Leify and toilet history. Let's just put it that way. It doesn't look good for him. It doesn't look good for him. I mean, obviously, I don't want to give too much away about what Leify's done in the past, but let's just say he has had a few troubles finding where the toilet is. That's all.
You painted a really good picture of him, Chris. I think he's really happy.
Yeah.
Now that everybody's really sure that no one's really sure where he shits.
Yeah, well, I wanted to get into the reason I wanted to bring this up. The reason I wanted to get into it because we were saying logically, okay, say it's not Leif. He says it's not him. Okay, it's not Leif. Who realistically could it be? Now, obviously, we don't even know names, but there was the theory floating around about the guest, the wandering guest, as I like to call it, the guest of that they stayed over someone's flat, and then early on decided, right. I need to go or I'm going. And then they realized that they had to go whilst they were leaving sort of thing. I think that's a realistic possibility. I haven't heard your opinion on this, Lynchy. You've been quiet on the issue. What is your theory or what's your hypothesis on Poogate?
Well, I just prefer not to speak. So if I speak, I'm in big trouble. No, personally, I can't see it being Leif. I think.
Yeah, I don't think it was Leif.
I did speak to Leify's flatmate the other day when I saw him, and he gave me a few insights into the type of people that live in this block. So I am suspicious that it's the wandering guest.
Yeah, I think the wandering guest is a good theory.
Back to their friend's flat, they've chosen to use the bottom of the stairwell.
Yeah, well, we also it must be stated as well. So it's like in the case of in lots of blocks of flat, is that you need a code to get in. Right, you need a code to get in. So some people say, well, that eliminates any sort of random person from coming in on the street. But there have been situations where the door isn't fully shut, which opens up quite literally a lot of possibilities. Barnes, what do you think about Poogate? I mean, any theories?
I'm going to introduce a new theory that it may not have been Josh Leafy, but it could have been another resident. Because, as you say, you need a code to get in the door. And also, if you take a poo, I feel like even if you're really drunk, you want to be quite comfortable. And I feel like the environment of being in your own block of flats might allow you to do that. I think if you were just a random guest staying over, you could just walk outside. I mean, it's literally 1 yard away, and you can get out the door. You might not be able to get back in, but you can get out. So I think that suggests to me it's a resident. I'm not saying it's Josh Leafy. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. The evidence may or may not support that theory, but I'm saying I think it's a resident.
I think it's a resident. I just can't think someone, the metaphor is there, quite literally would shit on their own doorstep. That to me
it's not their doorstep. It's a communal
it's near
doorstep,
enough.
I suppose.
It
depends
yeah. But still, like, the only way I think it could be a resident, is if, for whatever reason, they got locked out of their own place. That's the only thing I can think of. That maybe you've got a bit of a bug or whatever, and then the door's locked. I can't get back in, and I need to go. But I mean, we can't show you the image of anything. We can't show the image of anything.
Jesus.
But
you're not
the position
out, Owen, yet.
No, I forgot. There is a clip that I forgot to edit prior to this, which is that's on me. That's on me. The poo's on me. But the position of it, that doesn't indicate to me that it would be like a resident that got locked out. I mean, Ed, you've got lots of theories on these kind of issues. What do you think?
Do you know what was one of my favourite little additional bits of information? Was that there were some takeaway menus near the scene, and it was discovered later on that they had been used as toilet paper. So this person clearly wasn't like completely out of it. They had some wits about them.
What? So they said that. But I think that was afterwards, wasn't it? So it was there, and I think someone in the building cleared that up. I don't think that's mutually exclusive of that's the person that did it. I think someone in the building was a bit like, this is ridiculous. Like, I can't be doing with this. Just get rid of it. I don't know if
that's use takeaway menus.
Yeah, I was thinking someone's done it, and it's slightly runnier than they were anticipating. They thought, I'm going to have to wipe, and they've looked around and seen some takeaway menus, and they've got.
Why would takeaway menus? This is at the bottom of the stairs. So why would there be randomly takeaway menus at the bottom of the stairs? Unless someone brought reading material, which is way more premeditated than I even thought. If that's the case,
posted them through the door. They haven't got a code for.
You could just post them through.
Hey, what do you think, Ginge?
Well, the bit that really made that I couldn't understand was when Leafy said his neighbours think it was him. But how do they indicate to him they think it's him?
I think pure paranoia. I think
they all just open the door when he leaves and just stare at him as he walks down the stairs. I don't really know how they've indicated to him that they think it's him.
I think
they just walked out and just pointed at him as he walked out the door. I don't really know.
It's the paranoia of a guilty man. It's the paranoia of a guilty man. I think that's what it may be. I think it's because, like we said, he claims that he found it, and because he found it, that's prime suspect stuff. That really is, and
with very little alibi.
With no alibi, that's the problem. I think when he first found it, he was alone. He mentioned that afterwards he took the flatmate down with him. But maybe that's a forced kind of alibi. You know what I mean? And if this was, I don't know, whatever detective show's big, Line of Duty. I haven't even watched that, by the way. I've never even watched that.
Death in Paradise.
If this was Death in Paradise, you would say, okay, they did what they did first, and then they bring someone afterwards to try and be like, oh no, I found it. You were with me, right? That's all I'm saying. There's a lot that goes into Poogate.
It was. He went down in the morning for a cigarette and found it. And he also said that he let out his friend at 2:30 in the morning, which is pretty late. So we've got a pretty small window. And he was on the scene in both instances. Mm. And he has no alibi for the time in between.
No alibi. So hopefully when and to be honest, the whole injury, the only reason he's not doing it tonight is because he goes, I can't sit upright. Maybe you just can't face the fear of actually discussing Poogate with an audience. So I don't know.
Comment. See who it is.
I don't know. This is very interesting. Go on, Chris.
I was going to say, if you're watching this on YouTube, let us know down in the comment section below. Who done it? Who done it? Was it Latham? Was it a resident?
Wow. Again, I would prefer theories. I want to know theories. I don't want wild accusations. I want theories as to, obviously, you're not going to know a person, but a scenario. Like I said, the wandering guest, I think, is a solid theory. I think that's solid. I think that makes sense.
Let's have theories of in what scenario is it acceptable to poo in a staircase?
Well, there's none. There's none. Well, anger and rage and revenge. I think that's your kind of limit there.
Or if you had a chronic illness.
Well, yeah, obviously.
Nowhere to go.
But then again, why are you? If you've got some kind of chronic illness, why do you find yourself in that kind of a situation? That's not your home. Don't go out. Don't risk it. Would be my thing. Again, I think the wandering guest. Yeah, exactly. I think the wandering guest is a solid theory. That makes sense to me. Otherwise, if it's a resident, that's weird.
And on that,
not that finding a poo at the bottom of the stairs isn't weird anyway.
Yeah. On a communal staircase, which is carpeted, which is like the worst type as well, because that's got that you can't get rid of that shit.
Well, you're not. Are you trying to justify that if this was some kind of laminate flooring, it would be okay?
Well, this is easy to clear up.
Very practical.
Local experience.
This was another question that like Leafy decided that didn't he put in the chat how he doesn't actually know who to call, which is another good point. Who do you call when this is a very specific problem, isn't it? I mean, this can't come up very often.
He said he called the building people, but they didn't work on a Sunday, which I think is outrageous. Because let's be serious here. If it was more than a poo, like so in serious, sorry, we don't work on Sundays. You're gonna have to let that corpse stay there. Boom. I'd be like, what? Not that you would call the building people, probably the police.
Yeah, I was about to say you call the police in your dead body.
Yeah.
So building people, there's someone here. Anyway, we'll end it there. If you can let us know about your Poogate theories in the comment section below, that would be highly humorous. I don't even know if that will happen, but hey, I'll be interested to see what happens. Be sure to smash a like on the video too and subscribe, bottom right hand corner. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, be sure to subscribe. And when we have an update on Poogate, it'll just go straight into your feed. No worries, because there's going to be Poogate Volume 2, 3. I want to have updates on this. I want to have an in-depth interview with Leif about this. He can't run and hide forever. This is out there now, so it's a real thing. And we're going to get to the bottom of this. There's your pun. Like that. Okay. Well, thank you very much for watching, and we'll speak to you again very soon.